Better. Excellent. So, welcome. My name is James Dempsey, and we're going to talk about using upcoming feature flags. So, how you can get started with tomorrow's Swift features with yesterday's Xcode today. So, let me just talk about the past for a brief moment or two. I'm very excited to be here in Toronto. I've only been in Toronto once before in my life. It was a number of decades ago. So my father was born, about 2 provinces east of here. He grew up on a farm in northern New Brunswick, one of 13 children. And his brother Robert, I knew him as Uncle Bobby. And Uncle Bobby, I don't know why it's an off-brand Blue Jays hat that he has on. It was probably on sale somewhere, knowing Uncle Bobby. But Uncle Bobby was the hugest Blue Jays fan. So once when I was working at Apple, I was working in technical training. They sent me to Toronto to teach a course for a week, and I got the chance to have dinner with Uncle Bobby. Now, Uncle Bobby, he lived in Toronto for a long while. After he retired, he became an usher for Blue Jays games at what was then called the Sky Dome. So after dinner, there was no game. This was in the middle of winter. He took me to the Sky Dome, and I got kind of a backstage behind-the-scenes after-hour tour around the Sky Dome, which is a really fond memory I have of Uncle Bobby and a very fond memory I have of Toronto. So that's a little bit of the past. A little more of the past, I mentioned Apple sent me out as part of technical training to Toronto. I worked at Apple for 15 years, doing everything from evangelism to technical training. My last 5 years out of 15, I worked on AppKit. Specifically, the accessibility was one of my responsibilities in AppKit. And then I left almost 15 years ago, and I've been doing kind of independent consulting and contracting ever since, which brings us to the present. So one of the things I've been doing for the last while is a band called James Dempsey and the Breakpoints. You'll hear from them a little later. A couple other things. SwiftVersion.net. If you have ever lost track of what version of Swift are we on, what's the development version, and which version goes with which version of Xcode, that's the site for you. Build Setting Extractor, a free utility that's the easiest way to get your build settings out of an Xcode project and into XConfig files. And then about a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, Swift.org was made open source. And they started the Swift.org, the website work group. And I've had the honor to be a part of that work group for all of that time. So these are some things that I've been working on in what I call James Dempsey's cavalcade of profitless pursuits. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about the future. And in this talk, we're going to learn how you can bring the majesty and power of Swift 6 features into your code base today. Or put another way, we're going to talk about a compiler flag. The road to Swift 6, we've been, ever since Swift 5.0, we've been on the road to Swift 6. But as we've been going through the dot releases of Swift 5, one thing that's very important as new proposals are considered, very important, is source compatibility. In fact, the Swift team and the Swift infrastructure maintains a source compatibility suite where any new proposal is run against this suite to make sure that any new proposed change in Swift doesn't cause breakage of source. And so the list of kind of things that it's tested against, is there. Don't feel you need to write them down. But again, that list is available for you at that page. Source compatibility is very important as we move from dot release to dot release. In fact, every single proposal that goes to Swift Evolution has a section for source compatibility. Yet, as we move from 5 dot whatever it's going to be to 6, because Swift uses semantic versioning, where those minor releases, those dot releases, are not supposed to break code, but when you do a major release, you can introduce source breaking changes. Yes, it's true. Again, if you've been working with Swift, how many folks made the jump from Swift 2 to Swift 3? How about, oh, clap. I can't see you. I can't see the hands. How many made the jump from 3 to 4? I share your pain. 4 to 5 was not as bad, not as many source breaking changes. And again, as we move from 5 to 6, the ecosystem, the standard library, everything has settled down a great deal. So we don't have quite as much in terms of source breaking changes, but they are taken very seriously. So as an example, what's a source breaking change? We got regex a few releases back, and the desire was to have a literal, so you could just let regex and let the compiler check that it's a valid regex, and you wouldn't have to always be converting a string at runtime. It could be kind of a compiled literal. And the desire was to use forward slashes for the literal, because that's kind of the state of the art of what you do when you define literals or regexes, GIF, GIF, regex, regex. All right, is because that's what you do in other languages. However, running this change through that massive source compatibility library, there are a couple of cases where the parsing would get confused and you'd get compiler errors. And it was very few cases. It wasn't in the vast majority of code bases out there. However, that's a source breaking change. So formally, when regex made it into 5 dot, was it 6, 7, something like that, we had to use extended regex literals to be able to have a literal, to avoid the source incompatibility. And nobody wanted to do that. Everybody wanted to do this, but because it's a dot release, you had to do that. Now, that seems awful, right? So we don't know how long it's going to be till we get to Swift 6, till we can bring out that incompatibility. Wouldn't it be nice if there was some gosh darn way to use it this way, since it doesn't cause a problem in hardly anybody's code? And so they introduced a flag to the Swift compiler, enable bear/regex. And in fact, you might be saying, I never had to use this literal. Well, that's because in the version of Xcode that shipped with regex, they actually turned that on for you without you knowing it. So you've probably been using this advanced feature that's coming in Swift 6 already. And in fact, in many cases, we'd rather use something now than wait possibly months, possibly years, already years for this one. However, there's a problem, right? Which is, okay, so we added this flag to the compiler, and then we're going to add that flag to the compiler, and then this flag to the compiler, and then you've pretty much crapped up the interface of your compiler. And these are all the things that we are able to enable just from Swift 5.8 and back. So, one flag to rule them all, enable upcoming feature. And so it's parameterized. So instead of having a separate flag that's going to hang around forever in the compiler interface because somebody's tool chain somewhere is still compiling Swift 5 dot whatever, and you can't break that either, we now have a much more flexible way to enable these upcoming features. And this, you can read all the details in Swift Evolution Proposal 362, which we became implemented in Swift 5.8 this spring. I think this is an awesome, seemingly minor, but really powerful feature. Because what it allows us to do is to have pretty much the most flexible transition possible. Now, we can enable that target by target. We can enable it package by package. But to be honest, we've always been able to do that, right? When we move to Swift 6, we can switch the compiler mode to 6 on a target by target or package by package basis. Some of our stuff can still use 5 dot whatever. But in this case, we can also migrate feature by feature. Now, why would I want to turn these things? Why don't I just wait? One of the main reasons you might want to turn this on is to gather some information, to reduce the risk of the transition, or to just spread the work of the transition over a longer period of time. Because as soon as you turn one of those flags on, you're probably going to find out that your project or your code, your target, your package, one of 3 things is going to be true. Either you're going to have no work to do, you turn it on, you compile, no errors, you run your tests, no errors. Oh, I guess I'm not affected by this change. Awesome. There might be a little work, in which case, you fix the 2 or 3 things, check in the change. Or you might find you have a lot of work. But the earlier you find out you have a lot of work, the better it is for you, because you can write up the issue. You can get an idea of how long it's going to take. You can schedule the work, and you can even schedule the work before Swift 6 even ships, before Swift 6 is even announced. So that's one of the main things, is gathering that information. Flip it on, see how it goes. But then if you do have no work or just a little work to do, I'd encourage you to leave that flag turned on. Again, for a couple of reasons. The first is that now the compiler is going to be checking to make sure that all the code that you write is compliant with how that feature is going to be in Swift 6. So you're not going to, I ran it and everything was fine, and then 6 months, 9 months from now, a bunch of code got added that now we have to fix. You can just turn it on, that's fine. The second benefit you get is, and that is the clip art that Keynote says is a brain, is that you start getting into the habit of writing the code. You get that muscle memory of how the code is going to look. So you get a kind of a head start on learning Swift 6 and having it ingrained as that's what happens. So an example is there's a upcoming feature flag and an upcoming feature that they call existential any, which sounds very philosophical. But really, it's this idea that when you're using a protocol as a standalone type, they call that an existential. And in Swift 6, you will be required to denote those types with the any keyword. Now, you can use any now in the current version of Swift, but the compiler is going to make you use it in Swift 6. So turn on existential any, and that existing code, the compiler is going to tell you that's wrong. You're going to get a fix-it that throws the any in there, and now all of your code is Swift 6 compatible for that feature. Leave it turned on. Anytime you make this error of just having it be plain old drawable, the compiler will complain, and you can fix the code. And then after a while, that'll be second nature because you've done it so many times. So how do I turn this thing on? Well, In Xcode, it's just an other Swift flag. So it's just the flag itself and then the name of the upcoming feature. If you use xcconfig files, it's handy to use the relatively new / for multi-line values. I find xcconfig files to be a great place to put the configuration information as opposed to the project, hence why I wrote a utility about it. And then a package manifest, there's in Swift settings, there's enable upcoming features, and then it's just the same string is used in all of these cases to define which feature. And again, you can, in all of these cases, just add as many flags as you need, one per feature. And then in addition, conditional compilation has feature was added along with the compiler flag, so that within your code, if you need to make a choice depending on whether the feature is present or not, you're able to do that. Note that since that appeared in Swift 5.8, the 5.8 toolchain, you also need to check to make sure that the compiler supports that choice. All right. I hope I'm not sensing any of this. Actually, I'm very enthusiastic about upcoming feature flags. Now, the question would be, if you are enthusiastic, then the next question in your mind is, all right, I know how to do them. What are they? How do I find out what are the upcoming feature flags that are valid? And for that, we're going to take a look at the Swift Evolution dashboard. So on Swift.org, under Swift Evolution, is the Swift Evolution dashboard. That's one of the things that the work group did over the past year, was move it from its own kind of private thing to be part of Swift.org. And one of the things I spent some time doing this spring was adding this button. Oh. Well, and it's imaginary. How did that not do what it's supposed to do? Yeah, sure. It just... Yeah, that should be fine. There it is. All right, I guess I need to use that screen there. Okay. So I did spend a chunk of time adding this button. And what this button does is it toggles an upcoming feature flag filter. And so it's very easy to find out which proposals have an upcoming feature flag. The feature flag's listed. You can just copy and paste it out of here into Xcode or wherever you need to. They're only valid, obviously, in the version of Swift that they are introduced in or implemented in, not later. And there's a fair number of them, considering that this just went in the spring. Now, another thing I'd just like to show is you can use this in conjunction with a filtering functionality where you can filter by status, but the best status to filter on, or a fun one, is implemented, because then you can toggle on and off a filter for what version. So if you want to know, all right, what are new ones in 5.9 feature flags, those are the new ones, or proposals that have upcoming feature flags in 5.9. So getting all this to work is my first ever production JavaScript code. So I'm very proud of it. But I also think it's very, oh, thank you. It's probably not the most efficient JavaScript code, but I guess what JavaScript code is. Another thing is when you turn on this feature, if you forget how to do the things that I'm talking about in this talk, you can click through here. We recently did a blog post using upcoming feature flags, which will show you exactly how to set them up if you forget the contents of this talk. Excellent. And now if we could go back to slides, maybe. All right, no problem. Thanks. Perfect. Excellent. So I also, even before I added that button, proud of that button, I love visiting the Swift Evolution dashboard because it's like having a bit of a crystal ball into what's coming down the pike. Even if you never click into the forums where they just are discussing all the proposals, even if you just kind of read the top levels and like click into the proposals and read the intro as to, you get kind of a sense of what might be coming down the pike. And I find it's kind of enjoyable to do, to kind of get a little bit of a head start before, know something about what's happening before Paul Hudson does. So anyway, I highly recommend checking out the Evolution dashboard just for fun. So again, using upcoming feature flags, one of the niceties of it is that you can start using features immediately. But I think maybe even the more important feature is that you and your teams can start making sure that feature by feature, target by target, your code is ready for Swift 6. And if it's not at the moment, it gives you a really good idea of what kind of work you might need to do and gives you kind of a maximum amount of time possible for you to schedule and get it done. So thank you very much. That was using upcoming feature flags.